Emmeline Pankhurst stands as one of the most iconic figures in the fight for women's suffrage, known for her unwavering dedication to securing voting rights for women. Her leadership, along with the efforts of the Women's Social and Political Union, WSPU, revolutionized the suffrage movement not only in the United Kingdom but also globally. The WSPU, founded in 1903 by Pankhurst, was marked by its bold and sometimes radical tactics. Unlike other suffrage organizations that favored peaceful methods, the WSPU advocated for militant activism, bringing a sense of urgency and visibility to the cause. Emmeline Pankhurst was born in 1858 in Manchester, a city that was a hub for radical political thought during the 19th century. Raised in a politically active family, she was exposed to ideas about women's rights and social reform from an early age. Her parents were staunch supporters of women's suffrage, and they encouraged their children to engage with political issues. This environment cultivated Pankhurst's passion for social justice, which would later define her life's work. In 1879, Pankhurst married Richard Pankhurst, a lawyer and ardent supporter of women's rights. Richard's legal career focused on issues of women's property rights and suffrage, further shaping Emmeline's commitment to these causes. After his death in 1898, Pankhurst devoted herself fully to the cause of women's suffrage. She had already been active in the Independent Labour Party, ILP, but she grew disillusioned with the slow progress made by the existing suffrage organisations. Determined to push the movement forward, Pankhurst founded the WSPU in 1903, an organisation that would forever change the landscape of political activism in the UK. The motto of the WSPU, "Deeds, not words," reflected the organisation's break from traditional suffrage groups that relied on peaceful persuasion and lobbying, while other groups, such as the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies, led by Millicent Fawcett, adopted a more moderate approach. Pankhurst and the WSPU believed that bold action was the only way to force the government to take women's demands seriously. The WSPU's early tactics involved protests and acts of civil disobedience. They organised rallies, disrupted political meetings, and staged demonstrations that were designed to capture public attention. One of the earliest examples of their disruptive tactics occurred in 1905, when Christabel Pankhurst, Emmeline's daughter, and fellow WSPU member Annie Kenney interrupted a meeting of the Liberal Party. When asked about their stance on women's suffrage, the speakers avoided the question. In response, the women unfurled a banner and demanded an answer. They were arrested, marking the first of many such confrontations between WSPU members and the police. The arrests of WSPU members became a strategic part of their activism. Each arrest drew media attention and public debate, elevating the suffrage cause to a level of national conversation. The women who were arrested often refused to pay fines, choosing instead to go to prison, further emphasizing their willingness to suffer for the cause. As the government continued to resist granting women the vote, the WSPU escalated its tactics. From 1908 onwards, the organization moved from civil disobedience to acts of outright militancy. Their members, known as suffragettes, engaged in hunger strikes, vandalized property, and even resorted to arson. Some of the most famous incidents involved suffragettes chaining themselves to railings outside government buildings, smashing windows of prominent businesses and defacing public monuments. One of the most dramatic acts of defiance was the bombing of David Lloyd George's newly built home in 1913. Although no one was harmed in the attack, it was a shocking display of the suffragettes' willingness to take drastic measures to achieve their aims. Such acts of violence, however, alienated some supporters and increased tensions between the WSPU and more moderate suffrage groups. Nevertheless, these tactics kept the suffrage issue at the forefront of political debate. Hunger strikes became one of the WSPU's most effective methods of protest after their members were imprisoned. The suffragettes who went on hunger strike sought to challenge the state's treatment of political prisoners and to draw attention to their cause. In response, the government introduced the practice of force-feeding, a brutal procedure that involved feeding the women through tubes, often against their will. This method was widely condemned as inhumane, leading to a public outcry. The government's harsh treatment of imprisoned suffragettes only served to galvanize support for the movement. Public sympathy grew, as many saw the suffragettes as martyrs suffering for their cause. The infamous Cat and Mouse Act of 1913, which allowed the temporary release of hunger-striking suffragettes only to re-imprison them once they regained their health, further exposed the lengths to which the government would go to suppress the movement. The WSPU's militant approach was divisive, but its impact on the suffrage movement was undeniable. By 1914, the suffragettes had succeeded in making women's suffrage one of the most pressing political issues of the time. The WSPU's confrontational tactics generated massive media coverage, keeping the issue in the public eye and pressuring politicians to address the demands of the movement. The suffragettes' bold actions helped to raise awareness of the systemic inequalities faced by women. Their willingness to endure imprisonment, hunger strikes, and public scorn garnered sympathy from various quarters, including sections of the working class and progressive intellectuals. The suffrage cause began to gain international attention, with women's rights activists around the world drawing inspiration from the British suffragettes. The WSPU also played a crucial role in redefining the image of women in society. The suffragettes challenged the traditional notions of femininity that confined women to the domestic sphere. Through their activism, they demonstrated that women could be politically engaged, assertive, and capable of shaping national policy. This shift in perception was a significant cultural victory that extended beyond the immediate goal of obtaining the vote. World War I marked a turning point in the suffrage movement. When the war broke out, Emmeline Pankhurst and the WSPU shifted their focus from militancy to supporting the war effort. They suspended their suffrage campaign and encouraged women to take on roles traditionally held by men who had gone to fight. Women worked in factories, served as nurses, and contributed to the war effort in various capacities. This shift demonstrated women's capabilities in public life and further undermined the arguments against granting them the vote. In 1918, the Representation of the People Act was passed, granting voting rights to women over the age of 30 who met certain property qualifications. While it was not full suffrage, it was a significant step forward. In 1928, women were granted equal voting rights with men, a triumph that could not have been achieved without the groundwork laid by Emmeline Pankhurst and the WSPU. Emmeline Pankhurst and the WSPU transformed the suffrage movement in ways that were both radical and necessary. Through their bold tactics and unwavering dedication, they pushed the issue of women's suffrage to the forefront of British politics. Their willingness to engage in militant activism, endure imprisonment, and challenge societal norms played a critical role in securing voting rights for women. Though their methods were controversial, the legacy of the WSPU is one of immense impact, not only on the suffrage movement, but on the broader struggle for gender equality. Their story serves as a reminder of the power of organized activism and the lengths to which individuals must sometimes go to achieve social justice.